We meet Tomokwi Canada, who just committed the grave error of asking Crazy out on a date. Canada receives the isekai in the worst conceivable manner since, in case it wasn't already obvious, those 38 stabbing wounds were lethal. However, when he awakens in his next life to discover an old, ugly goblin glaring at him, things still don't get any better for him. Though it seems he has been reincarnated as one of them, he has no idea what is happening. Thus, the elder renames him Gobro. The elderly guy continues forcing a large, juicy maggot down his throat in order to get that extra protein. Gobro is also unable of speaking or saying no since he is still a baby. On the second day, he awoke to see that he was surrounded by several ugly green kids, and he had to confront the fact that he was no more attractive than them. He spends the rest of the day sobbing over the loss of his lovely human face as he accepts that he died and was reincarnated as this frail and defenseless infant. By day 3, he's come to the realization that goblins seem to age much more quickly than humans, yet he still looks bald. It's not perfect, but at least he can move and talk again, so he decides to make the most of his newfound freedom and go out into the world. Day 4 finds the goblins, who are now mostly grown, meeting up with the elder again as he holds out a tray of maggots. He informs them that because they are freeloaders, he will no longer be providing for them and that they would have to acquire food on their own after today. Even though Gobru dislikes the thought of eating maggots voluntarily, he gobbles them down as they are a great source of protein. Later, he is forced to go out into the world by himself. When he emerges from the cave, he discovers a stunning environment full with strange flora and fauna. Gobru attempts to comfort the other goblin who has followed him by telling him that this is his first time viewing the location as well. The other goblin is afraid to be outdoors for the first time ever. Gobkichi is the second goblin, and despite his lack of intelligence, Gobru chose to pair up with him for one very essential reason. Because of his bulk genetic, he will be useful in food hunting. Gobru dispatches Gobkichi to assault the rabbit from the front once they discover it in the jungle. The rabbit flees from him, but as Gobru had already positioned himself on a neighboring tree, this was all part of the plan. He uses the stick to shatter the rabbit's spine as soon as it gets close to him, jumping down from the tree. This kind of hunting works really well, but once the rabbit was captured, Gobkichi became a little too possessive of it, so Gobru had to scold him to make sure he understood who was in control. Gobru starts getting the rabbit ready for their meal after giving him a thorough scolding. He breaks off the rabbit's corn and examines it, thinking he might turn this into a respectable weapon. He receives a notification in his mind at that moment, but he is unsure of what to interpret since the elder has never provided any guidance on this. But Gobkichi, who has recovered and is drooling over his fair portion of meat, interrupts his train of thinking. Gobkichi gratefully eats the flesh that Gobru had pulled out after conceiving. As the two carry out their hunting plan on the 5th day, Gobru has been effective in using the rabbit horn as a weapon. He gets another notification in his mind as he removes a fresh horn from the rabbit, but he's still not sure what it means. He sits down to eat some meat, but as soon as he takes a mouthful of rabbit's meat, a voice tells him that he has learned how to escape. His eyes shine blue. He remembers that in his previous existence, he had the uncommon talent of absorption, which gave him the potential to absorb the powers of everything he consumed. Now, everything makes sense to him. He still has absorption, but because he is in a new body, it seems that all the other skills he has acquired have been lost. He's satisfied with the way things turned out since he was still very fortunate to be able to maintain a talent at all. By day 6, Gobru has already begun to get attention from ladies with his amazing flesh, since there are many creatures hiding in the forest that he can devour to increase strength. Considering that others had perished attempting to get horned rabbits, she was astounded that he and Gobkichi had succeeded in doing so. Furthermore, the existence of hair on her head clearly confirms that goblins are capable of having follicles. Gobkichi and Gobru, however, are merely bald. She was ecstatic when Gobru asked if she wanted to join them on their search the next day. However, they were forced to postpone their search because of the excessive rain on the 7th day. Gobru, who has never gone back before, decides to go see what they have in storage because he has nothing else to do. He wasn't ready for what he saw there, however. He discovered a bunch of human ladies held hostage, proving that Goblin Slayer was correct all along, even in this world. He'll simply attempt to ignore it, so he puts his attention into making a weapon. Gobji, the Goblin Elder, approaches him as he seems to be strangely driven to live at this pace. He thinks Gobru could level up more quickly than anticipated. Gobji instructs Gobru to touch his forehead in order to observe the level system since he was unaware that it existed here. After doing so, Gobru discovers that the Elder is at level 86 at the moment. He also says that reaching level 100 would allow one to grow into a greater entity. But since goblins mature so quickly, he seems much older than he really is, even though he is just in his 20s. As he goes, he promises Goblin that when the bright young things return from the town, he will get to see what an evolved hobgoblin looks like. However, there is a problem with Goblin. When it was clear out the next day, Goblin and the other two went hunting, with Gobkichi as their striker and Goblin as Gobmi's backup. They have excellent chemistry for just having been together for a week. They were able to obtain a lot of flesh with this structure, and Gobmi is moved to tears when she bites into it because it is so juicy and thick. Goblin also takes a taste, and the snake flesh ends up teaching him a few new tricks. They continued hunting the next day, but by day 11, they had made the mistake of entering an unidentified cave, and they were now facing a massive swarm of vampire bats. They instantly begin to flee, but the bats are too quick, so Gobkichi and Goblin decide to remain behind and take care of them. At first, they were in danger of being overrun, but Goblin stops them all with his newly acquired evil eye ability. They murder every bat when they've got them all frozen in place, and then they eat their bodies. After consuming the bat flesh, Goblin has additional abilities such as echolocation and vamp up. Some of the other goblins, who are hungry because they are too stupid to hunt on their own, bathe them while they keep eating like kings. They tried to vent their resentment on him that evening since, clearly, he is the one who needs help, not them. Perhaps they wouldn't be as hungry if they spent as much time searching for food. However, they neglected to consider the fact that Goblin had a sense of ability, which allowed him to perceive their approach. He counterattacked, and while his true intention was not to kill, he misjudged how much of his venom skill to deploy, which led to the death of one of the assaulting goblins. Despite their attempts to kill them, he still seemed unaffected and determined to teach them a lesson. But when Gobmi comes around, even Goblin feels bad for them after what she did to them for assaulting her beloved Goblin. They want to execute a synchronized leaping on this effort when they go hunting again the next day. Gobkichi charges in as it is blinded by the rock they threw in its eye when it was simply going about its business. With its pickaxe, the orc pushes him back, but a second later, another rock shatters its fingers. They then use a club to reverse the bend of its legs in order to seize its kneecaps, and Goblin repeatedly stabs it in the skull to terminate the fight. They feast on the orc's flesh after it is slain, but Goblin says they should bring everything back to the cave because he has something he wants to do with it. Once they've returned with all the extra, Goblin brings the famished and broke goblins to attention, telling them they can have as much meat as they want. Following a brief period of uncertainty, every goblin falls to their knees and starts devouring Goblin's succulent flesh. Goblin observes them and considers how, in a previous life, he would never have assisted others in such a way, yet maybe being reborn altered him in ways beyond a physical one. Goblin is attempting to sleep that night after everyone else has gone to sleep, but the notification in his mind won't stop playing. It indicates that he has surpassed the level prerequisite and will shortly evolve into a hog-goblin. Nevertheless, he was so tired that he didn't notice it. The next morning, as Goblin awakens, he notices a peculiar change in his appearance. He doesn't understand why his appearance appears to have altered again overnight. To make matters worse, he is no longer bald and now resembles himself much more than he did before to his reincarnation. Gobkichi seems to have experienced the same thing, and although Gobmi hasn't changed, she finds her pal's new appearance to be adorable. When the elder visits to investigate the disturbance, he is astounded to learn that Goblin and Gobkichi, who were just born 2 weeks ago, have both evolved. Attracting Gobru's attention, Gobkichi declares he wants to see how much stronger he has become, and that hunting won't do. Instead, he wants to fight Gobru directly. The two set out to start their battle since Gobru was willing to take on the task. They start sparring in the wilderness, and although Gobkichi has become more stronger than he was before, he still lacks the fighting abilities needed to defeat Goblin. Gobkichi concedes defeat and compliments Goblin on his strength as he lets go of his legs underneath him and ducks under a blow. However, Goblin also gives him credit since Gobkichi has more power than anybody else in this place. Goblin can sense that something horrible is about to happen as he hears some wolf sounds in the distance. He summons Gobmi, who had been spying on them from a nearby hiding place, and orders her to go get the crossbow they had manufactured earlier, as they would soon want it. After killing their prey, which is a group of bunnies that they are pursuing down the hill, the wolves turn their attention to their next unsuspecting victim, an innocent orc who was just going about his business. The wolves aren't going to let the orc get away with its lifeless state, so they begin after it until they ultimately catch up and destroy it. As they watch everything unfold, Goblin and Gobkichi believe the wolves will be the ideal adversary to see just how powerful they have really grown since evolving. Goblin and Gobkichi rush in to start bashing in the wolves when Goblin gives the order for Gobmi to start shooting the crossbow at the wolves. The wolves are able to quickly dispatch them and kill each and every one of them since they lack any sense of unity due to the loss of their leader. After that, the leader wolf is the only one still alive, although even he will soon die from his injuries. Gobru approaches the fallen wolf and opens his jaws to take a massive bite out of it, giving him many new abilities, including the ability to lead. After returning the remaining dead wolves to the cave, Gobru gives the other goblins permission to consume as much food as they choose, but he wants them to catch their own meals going forward. They all drop down on their knees and implore Gobru to teach them how to hunt for themselves, since they lack the self-assurance to pull off anything like that. If they don't know how to hunt, he promises to teach them, and if they need weapons, he'll also show them how to create such. He gains a lot of popularity as a result, solidifying his position as the goblins' leader. It could have something to do with his leadership abilities, but he doesn't care. In order to accomplish his objective, he will put in a lot of effort to lead his allies and will keep eating and learning new abilities along the way. Day 17. Gobru awakens Gobji from his snooze to tell him about something that happened. Once they were confined in the cellar, all the human ladies recognized that Goblin Slayer was not going to help them, so they offer themselves with poison, rather than live out the rest of their lives as breeding slaves. Gobru and Gobji burn the corpses after holding a memorial. By the 23rd day, Gobru had started teaching all the goblins how to be goblins without sucking. He has quite the arsenal of talents at his disposal now since, while he was doing this, he also spent some time killing and devouring any and all creatures that might grant him important skills. At that moment, he sees other persons coming into view from a distance. Despite their goblin-like appearance, he is not the kind to blindly trust strangers. He pulls out his sword and is ready to slay them, but Gobuji stops him, telling him those goblins are the fathers of the goblins today, and they're coming home with milk. Gobji is also pleased that the ancient goblins have brought some more ladies to be utilized as breeding material, while Gobji is content with the abundance of food they brought back. Because goblin DNA is so powerful, goblin mating with non-goblin creatures will still produce goblin offspring. Even if Gobru is aware of the want to procreate, he still has to acknowledge how seriously wrong this is and that he has to take action. When he approaches the biggest goblin of the older generation and requests to be put in charge of looking after the ladies, the elder goblin becomes enraged since he thought he would be taking them for himself. A confrontation between the two was inevitable since Gobru never backs down, and both generations were prepared to step in and provide a hand when needed. However, two more goblins break it up before the carnage starts. They advise the two parties in conflict to find a resolution that won't include them, since they would rather not start a civil war between the generations. These two, Absato and Hopsi, imply that there will be a conflict between the leaders of the two generations that has to be resolved. Thus, the victor will have the last say over future community policies. In order to prevent anybody from dying, they also establish a rule prohibiting the use of weapons. The elder goblin consents to this, not realizing he would soon be humiliated, and after a few minutes, there's unmistakable proof that the elder goblin was defeated. Gobru ties him up in a spider's web, but he tells everyone that because the webs aren't weapons, this isn't considered cheating. Thanks to a previous talent, he creates it from his body like Toby Spider-Man. Now that the current alpha has been subdued and defeated, Gobru has emerged as the village's new leader, and nobody is brave enough to challenge him for fear of becoming much like the previous leader. Afterwards, Gobru goes to inform the ladies who have been taken that they need not fear since he has ordered all the goblins to keep their hands off of them, and that he will not be touching them too. After seeing to it that they are adequately cared for, he will ultimately arrange for their return to a human settlement. The ladies are happy to hear that everything would be well, but they figure a bargain like this must have a catch. So one of them asks Gobru what he wants them to do in return for their release. Gobru decided to assist them for other reasons than his sympathy for them. He tells them that he only wants to learn about the human world here since he has no other method to get knowledge on the subject. After a brief conversation, he learns that these ladies were formerly a member of a traveling merchant party. However, all of their men were killed in the goblin assault, leaving these 5 as the sole survivors who were later abducted and taken to this location. After being made to relive the horror they experienced, they begin to weep, but Gobru simply gets up and leaves without saying anything. After all, his people killed all of their friends and relatives. After a few days, the ladies seem to be more optimistic about their present circumstances, although this is most likely merely a coping mechanism. He's discovered from his time spent with them that while people in this world don't grow in the same manner as monsters, they can do a variety of tasks. Gobru thinks the red-haired one is a novice adventurer, but she's not a very strong fighter, so he could send her to train with the goblins later. In reference to training, Gobru forced all the elder goblins to participate as well. Regardless of their age, if they get irate with him, he will scold them. You can see that the old leader is not pleased about it, but he is no longer able to overrule Gobru's choices. For the following few days, Gobru concentrated on group exercises in order to educate all the goblins the new rules he had established for them. Because of the rain on the 31st day, everyone remained indoors. All was routine until Gobru's detecting ability warned him that several goblins were approaching the human ladies, and he is aware of the implications of that. The previous leader had rounded together a few of his friends, and they were about to enjoy themselves with the humans when Gobru appears out of nowhere. He clearly recalls spending a few days going over the rules with them, but it seems that some individuals never learn. He will thus need to impart yet another lesson to the elderly guy. The sound of Gobru dispatching one of the rebellious goblins awakens the ladies, who are visibly terrified. Gobru asks Gobmi to assist him in dragging all the goblins he has tied up outside and to urge everyone to gather around because he wants to show them something. The other goblins heard the ruckus and ran in to see what had occurred. That evening, Gobru pummeled the rule-breaking goblins to death in the pouring rain. The former leader had the worst fate of them, serving as Gobru's personal punching bag until he was barely conscious, at which point he was abandoned to a long and agonizing death outside in the rain. Gobru poses this question, wondering whether everyone is aware of the consequences of breaking the rules and why no one is brave enough to speak out. The next day, the party resumes their routine hunts and encounters a thorn whose scales are almost impossible to puncture. The thorn lunges at Gobru, but he stops it with his spider silk, immobilizing it so that he and Gobkichi could attack its weak spots and kill it with relative ease. Gobru and the others consume the flesh once it has been defeated, and he learns various new abilities, including triple strike. Gobru still doesn't know how the additional 2 strikes are produced, even if he is doing it himself, but he won't question it. The red-haired person approached Gobru in bed that night and just got in with him. She was presumably still afraid after what had occurred the night before, but Gobru allowed her to sleep in his bed, and nothing evil happened that night. But by dawn, Gobmi had become envious and had also crawled into Gobru's bed. In other news, because of all the heavy effort, Gobru, who was supposed to be carrying all the equipment, managed to develop as well, making her important to the storyline now. The Goblin's training has been split up into several units, with Hobsato in charge of the ordinary fighters, Gobmi in charge of the range units, and Gobkichi in charge of the armored forces. Furthermore, Gobu is in charge of teaching the support goblins now that she has changed. Being for Sai, she's been busy doing nothing at all since. Being the lone wizard among the goblins, she has no one to teach. Gobru made the decision to let the designated captains handle the goblins' training while he ventured out into the forest in search of some formidable prey. While there, he notices another trickhorn in the distance. Using his element of surprise, he chooses to attempt performing Phase 1 Demise Magic, a prior magic ability he learned. And the thorn that they had struggled so hard to overcome before was quickly and readily eliminated once his onslaught struck. It's possible that his overwhelming triumph gave him an excess of confidence as he proceeded to go more northward into the forest. However, it was only after delving deeply that he recalled what Gobuji had said to him a few days before to his birth. He was expressly advised last month not to go into the northern portion of the forest, as there is an animal known as the red bear that calls that area home. And because of his negligence, he has now encountered Red Bear. Gobru thinks he may be able to take this monster down if he can come up with a strategy, but he can't promise it since any sane person would have begun fleeing by now. He prepares to unleash his whole arsenal on the bear, using his demise magic in an attempt to kill and consume it in order to increase his level of competence. Since Gobru departed their training session that morning, no one else has seen him, and Gobmi, back in the cave, is growing concerned. However, because Gobru is powerful enough to likely survive, even if he gets himself into danger, the others aren't really concerned. However, given that the bear avoided the strikes, I'm not sure whether he has a strategy in place for this. In the process, he lost one arm, but the risk remains exactly the same. Therefore, Gobru knows that even the enhanced scales armor talent he obtained from the thorn won't help him if he is struck by one of those claw attacks. He makes the decision to kill the bear right away since he can no longer afford to suffer even one blow. But even when the bear strikes it in the head with an axe, it continues to chop away. Gobru is thus compelled to take a backseat and attempt something else. He tries to catch the bear with his spider webs, but it's too powerful for that and breaks away. The bear then uses one of its own abilities to shoot a wave of fire toward Gobru, igniting the forest as a whole. The bear starts to move away, figuring there's no way Gobru could have survived that assault. But Gobru survived the fire explosion, so he takes shelter and starts to mend his arm while he considers his options. It seems that he will need to be prepared to absorb some damage in order to defeat this creature, since he has never heard of a fire-breathing bear before. As the bear is about to leave, he goes back outside and baits it into attacking him with fire once again. However, this time he has a strategy to fight it, and he charges forward while using water magic to stop the flames. The bear's body is too tough to penetrate through from the outside, but the interior of its jaws is possibly a different matter. Thus, Goblin pierces the bear's jaws with his sword, causing a wound that he believes would be deadly. But as the bear slams him across the forest and into a tree, he snaps out of his smug smile. Although Goblin was able to pull one arm off of the bear and stab it in the jaw and across the skull, the bear is still not showing any signs of giving way. But after just one hit, Goblin is almost dead and will undoubtedly pass out if he receives another one of those blows. But for him, it merely heightens the excitement. The bear prepares to attack with its claws as he rushes back in and lifts his axe to do so. However, one of Gobru's arms is seen soaring into the air after the fight. Even though the bear had succeeded in ripping off Gobru's arm, he was ultimately still alive, even if he is within a hair's breadth from passing out. Taking a bite off of the bear claw that is impaling him, he manages to earn 2 new talents. However, he eventually passes out from his wounds. Then, he gets a message that he has met the level criteria, allowing him to develop into the rare Ogre class, which he accepts right away. When he eventually wakes up, he discovers that he has changed once again. Because his hand is healing, the other goblins are all shocked by the new goblin he has become. He was admonished by Goblin for worrying them while he was gone. Goblin falls to the ground, crying in agony, but our hero takes it like a man and remains there as she attempts to kick him. Goblin has followed Gobru everywhere ever since he became Ogre. He wants to grab himself a change of clothing, however, before he deals with it. The ladies are scared when he walks inside the storage area since they don't first recognize him. However, they do settle down a little as he demonstrates his abilities to them as identification. One of the human females examines the severely broken axe, which she seemed eager to repair. She also tells Gobru that she crafted a knife out of a magic stone, and that she would want him to look at it while he is here. Gobru offers her a pat on the head, pleased by all her hard work. She must be experiencing severe Stockholm Syndrome since she enjoys it. The redhead female, on the other hand, detests it since she feels envious that Gobru is showing his attention to another girl. Gobru then visits the twins to check on them, but the amount of work they have to do is too much for the two of them to undertake. They so ask Gobru whether they may have a few more helpers. Gobru decides to inform a few goblin females to come assist here since they requested, which the twins are glad to hear. Even Gobru, however, is shocked at how fast they warmed up to goblins after almost having their whole family murdered by them only a week before. He makes a joke about how wonderful it would be for them to be spouses, and although the girls don't appear to mind, Gobmi and the redhead do. He next visits the green-haired girl who has been busy concocting remedies to see how she is doing. He looks inside one of the vials and realizes it's poison, something the girl acknowledges. Her first goal was to poison the food and kill off every goblin, but she had manufactured it for protection. However, after discovering that there were reliable goblins that had his traits, she decided not to use it any longer. The next day, Gobru came to the realization that he could not continue with his usual training since, in his Ogre form, he could almost kill the other goblins by holding back. He will thus stop battling them. Gobpichi chooses to go hunting in order to get his mind straight after suffering a severe loss. Gobru is concerned about him, but he also understands that he has to give him some space. Everyone went about their daily lives for the remainder of the day, and Gobru, for once, had some time to himself as he passed the time by stitching beside Hobsa. He battled a red bear and lost an arm, but it hasn't stopped him all that much since he has the slime talent to make up for it. Putting that aside, he informs Hobsa that he needs his book returned so he can complete reading it. However, she just ignores him entirely and continues to read it. The next day, a goblin approached Gobru as he was idly enjoying his lunch when she ran over holding an injured carbuncle. Gobru tries curing it initially, but he says he'll have to contact the alchemist to prepare something to aid her since it has lost a lot of blood. When the therapy is over, the carbuncle wakes up and finds herself unsure of who these odd individuals are about her and what her present circumstances are. Despite the fact that she is unfamiliar with them, the carbuncle is thankful to them for sparing her life since they explain everything to her. She identifies herself as Returner and claims that she was recently assaulted by humans, which is how she got into that condition. It seems that the gem set in a carbuncle's forehead is valued at a hopping 1 billion gold pieces, which explains why they are attempting to murder her for it. Since she won't be around for long, she begs Gobru to kindly assist her in chasing the adventurers who are after her. Returner is an artificial carbuncle that was made long ago to preserve the wizard's treasure according to tradition. She won't be able to live for very long at this pace, however, since the assault severely damaged the core that keeps her alive. Even in death, her master would rather that his fabled jewels go to a group of goblins than allow humans to get their filthy paws on them since he had a deep animosity against humans throughout his lifetime. She would happily give Gobru access to the whole treasury's contents in exchange for his assistance in helping her get rid of those adventurers. Goblin is not going to let this fantastic chance pass him by without trying. He gives a call for everyone to assemble, explaining that they are going to this treasure today in order to drive some people away. The blacksmith girl offers him the spirit stone knife she mentioned the previous day when he asked her if she has it. Although he doesn't usually wield a knife, he believes that if his intention is to scare people, it would be preferable to enter empty-handed. Goblin instructed Gobkichi and the others to conceal first, so he could attempt to bargain with humans after the goblin squad entered the treasure that Carbuncle had mentioned. He searched the area on his own, seeking the adventurers, but suddenly those same adventurers cornered him. They complained to each other that they now had to deal with an ogre as well, but they merely resolved to get rid of it as soon as they could. A covered assassin attempts to sneak in for a murder, but Goblin spots it coming a mile away and blocks the blow with his bare hand. The adventurers are taken aback by how easy the assassin's disguise was discovered, but Goblin breaks them off by yelling that they are now in someone else's house, attempting to steal from it, and that they even came dangerously close to killing its protector. Furthermore, they don't seem to believe that their actions are improper in any way. However, they are unfortunate today as Goblin is a kind man who will allow them to avoid suffering too much. They launch an assault, but he easily avoids their blows due to their weakness. He nevertheless offers them the chance to leave before things get out of hand. Goblin is obviously out of his league, but they keep assaulting until he eventually loses patience and is ready to smash some skulls. Sadly, humans are renowned for their sudden lack of brain cells when thinking is required. The adventurers are beginning to realize that they should never have bothered with Goblin, but it's too late to turn around now that he's trapped them with his earth magic and ordering the others to start leaping these people. They robbed the adventurers of whatever they carried and threw them all out when they had finished torturing them. Goblin chooses to consume all of the treasure and as a result acquires the abilities of the objects. He may now call forth an item box that has a capacity of more than 100,000 things. Returner takes Goblin and the others to the treasure chamber, where her master breathed his last, surrounded by all of his amazing goods since he has kept his half of the agreement. Returner claims that Velvet, the legendary magician, was skilled at communicating with spirits, which explains how he was able to collect such a substantial amount of spirit stones. Since her time is running out, she thanks Goblin and the others one more for their assistance before vanishing in his palm and leaving her head gem behind, which Goblin consumes. They all pause to pay their respects to Returner, but that's okay since they soon begin robbing the location of everything that seems valuable. This is where his new item box came in useful. However, Goblin decided it would be better if he burnt the corpse before they left, since he felt horrible about leaving it in such an open manner. And while he's at it, the corpse melts to ash, revealing a gauntlet that Goblin doesn't think twice about dying. He puts the gauntlet on his missing arm, and it looks to be a legendary magic artifact since it adheres to him and replaces the missing arm. The arm can create poison and strings and rotate, among other incredibly fascinating characteristics, but most importantly, it can also work just like a normal hand. Goblin took a long time the next day evaluating all the equipment data taken from the treasury. Given that it had been gathered by a renowned wizard, it was all incredibly strong and of the highest caliber. Thus, Goblin gave the magic artifacts to the group's 15 hobgoblins the next day. He now has 3 legendary magic artifacts all to himself after keeping this vermilion spear and a legendary magic bracelet for himself. Goblin made the decision to stage a series of fights on day 40 to ascertain the various goblins' rankings. The next day, Goblin left early in the morning to seek some animals he had never engaged in combat with. He defeated the golden spider with a single blow in the first instance, and after consuming its flesh, he gained another ability that lets him weave golden threads. He finds himself under a brightly lit tree as he strolls through the forest, which presents a bit of a challenge for him since this is the Dryad's home. They lure males of sentient species into becoming their food source by preying on them. Goblin had heard about them from Babuji, and Goblin himself who wanted to go out while getting sucked dry by a Dryad. But Goblin would never choose anything so opulent, at least that's what he tells himself, because he just folds the moment a Dryad shows up and begins getting intimate. He makes an effort to consider this rationally, but then he recalls that he is still a virgin in this world. Therefore, logic is completely disregarded when Goblin uses his holy ability, the Golden Pep. I won't go into specifics, but a lot transpired in the course of the next 5 hours, leaving the Dryad in awe at the breadth and length of what she sees in front of her. When they were finished, the Dryad was pleading with him to return soon for another round. After that, Goblin goes to a nearby waterfall to wash himself off, but before he knows it, a group of lizardmen has encircled him. He thus cured them and everything else that had attempted to harm him. When Goblin learned the following day that 2 goblins had the potential to become mages, he sent them to train with Hobsei. He can't, however, claim to be fond of the expression on her face as she considers being able to instruct other goblins. In other news, Goblin is now the target of all the females in the cave, and he has no idea why because none of them would tell him. The girl with the green hair turns out to be the most sensible person here, so he goes to her for guidance. She then informs him that everyone is upset with him since they know he just visited Pound Town. They are envious that he didn't choose them first since the Dryad left some quite distinctive markings on his body. The girl with green hair feels the same way, but instead of acting jealously and keeping her sentiments to herself, she decides to express her feelings a bit more openly. As seen before, Goblin folds up more easily than a blanket in these types of circumstances, but Goblin won't let it to happen, at least not until she gets to participate as well, and it seems that everyone else feels the same way. There was a lot more that day, too much for Goblin to discuss, but he had to install a soundproof wall in his chamber.